Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Lovely to see everybody joining us. It's great to have so many people joining this online Southwest Amphibian and Reptile Group meeting.
Hi everyone, so I hope everyone's had a good break. Now I'd like to introduce Gemma Harding from the Wiltshire Amphibian Reptile Group, and she will be speaking on an update for the group itself.
So yeah, hi, I'm Gemma. So I'm chair of Wiltshire Amphibian and Reptile Group. We're a very small group. There's only 4 of us. So there's myself, Sue, Nick, and Ian. So between us, we try and do as much as we can, which isn't that much. So we used to do a lot. I can't remember how long I've been doing this, probably about 10 years, but I used to do a lot of talks, a lot of training sessions, but nothing ever came of them much. So what we decided to do, because we didn't have many volunteers, was to focus on local projects. And we do a lot of stuff with the Wiltshire Wildlife Trust. And yeah, we don't do so many talks anymore, and we just focus on small local projects and tow patrols. We did, I was going to say last year, it seems like last year, in 2018, we did produce an atlas for Wiltshire with the Biological Records Centre that was driven by Gareth Harris. That was a really good initiative and a really good opportunity for us to see very large gaps in the data across Wiltshire. We're not as big as some of the other counties, but it's still a big county, and we have a lot of gaps, even in the most widespread species. So that's something we still need to work on addressing. But yeah, the atlas is available on the ARG site. So some small projects we did, we supported the research at University of Wolverhampton. We did that last year. Both our tow patrol at Smallbrook Meadows in Warminster, they collected some mortalities and sent them off, and we swabbed some frogs and toads in a local country park. One of the main projects we focus on is a site called Centenary Copse. There was a pond built there in the 90s, we think, and it has GCM present. We've done a few surveys there, but it is slowly disappearing. The liner is gone, and it's a council site. We do some management there. Nick Goddard from the group, he works with the rangers, and they do as much as they can. But the pond is failing, and the population is likely to disappear. Although there's a golf course nearby which has a really good population of great crested newts. But this year he has been in touch with the Wildlife Trust water team. It's a group called Wild Landscapes, and I think they're going to hopefully be able to help us restore the pond or create another pond close to it so that we can maintain that population. So that would be really good. So the tow patrols we do, Smallbrook in Warminster, that's a large patrol which Ian Perkins runs along with the Sustainable Warminster group. They're really active. They do great stuff there. They've had the BBC out filming this year. They even provided a soundbite for Radio 4. See if I can play some of it. Yeah, so that was played on Radio 4, Sounds of Spring. You could hear the people talking to the toads. We all do it. So yeah, so that was nice. They're a really passionate team up there. There is a large development threatening part of the toads migration route. So they're currently appealing that. Ian and the group are working really hard on that, and continuing with their appeal to try and reduce and mitigate the impact to the toads and other wildlife as much as possible. But yeah, these are the figures from the patrol. It's quite a large site with good numbers on lots of the sections, and yeah, they're doing great stuff there. That's also a wildlife trust reserve. The tow patrol we have here, so most of us are based here in Swindon. This project started out, we noticed a number of toads trapped. There was a new development, and they had really, before it was opened up, they had really high curbs, and we were finding a lot of toads trapped on the road. So we set up logged an official crossing with Frog Life and started rescuing the toads from the roads. But as the development opened up, the toads actually disappeared from the roads, and we were basically, it became a drain rescue mission, which however many years later is still going on. We did liaise with the developers and the ecologists on site, and a number of the drains now have ladders, but there's still not many drop curbs, so we still need to push on that site, and we still are going out and collecting frogs, toads, newts from those drains. Another really great project which has come about this year from they made contact with us. It's a group called Avon Needs Trees. I'll be interested to know if Avon or Somerset, any other groups have heard of them, or what, because so basically Avon Needs Trees are buying up tracts of land to plant woodland on primarily, but they're also considering all wildlife, hence they contacted us to come and look at the site and see if we thought it was suitable. So we did some bottle trapping in the flooded pools in the woodland, and reptile surveys up on the banks of the reserve, and we found palmate newts and a good population of slowworms. So they're going to be managing that site, and we're going to keep working with them to advise them on how to do that and, you know, make it the best site for wildlife. They've also just secured their next plot of land, so hopefully we'll do the same there. But yeah, it's very likely they're going to have, hopefully they'll have plots of land in Bristol and wherever the Avon catchment is. So yeah, there's potential for other groups to get involved with those sites. So yeah, let me know if, well, have a look on their website, and they share new sites as they get them. So yeah, it's a really nice, positive thing to be part of. So in the future, yeah, as I say, we're a really small group. I think the biggest thing I've done in the last year is built a pond in my garden, which started as that small baby bath and is now developed into this bigger pond. But yeah, so there's a lot of, for us in Swindon at least, there's a lot of ponds that were mitigation ponds, Section 106 ponds that have now gone into disrepair, that the council haven't got funding to deal with, and we would like to try and find ways to restore those and save the populations. Yeah, we're quite limited on time, but we'd like to get more volunteers involved, do more public awareness, get records from the public. So we're not the best at the media side of things, but that's what we do need to do. So if there's anyone that wants to help us with that, anyone from Wiltshire listening who'd like to join us and, you know, help us get records and get people interested, then that would be great. Yeah, we are working on ARG Web. That will help us when we find the time to work on it properly. And yeah, we'll keep doing projects with Wiltshire Wildlife Trust and Avon Needs Trees, and yeah, and just keep working as best we can to do the small bits. And Ian's, so we're in Swindon, and then there's Warminster, so we've still got a huge bit of Wiltshire that we do absolutely nothing in. So we would like to eventually spread out and work in those areas eventually. So yeah, if you want to contact us, there's our details, and we're on Twitter and Facebook. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Gemma. Does anyone have any questions? We are running a bit behind, but if anyone has any questions for Gemma, add them onto the Q&A and Gemma can answer them for you. So our next presenter is Becky Turner. She's our data officer at Cornwall Reptile Amphibian Group. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here as she is currently moving home, but she was kind enough to send us a video of her talk.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a good day so far at the SW ARGs regional meeting. It's a lovely day here in the southwest, and on good sunny days, some of you know how lovely it is to spot an adder basking on a bank, much like this chap here pictured on the right. So if I just draw your attention to the two thin dwindling strands of gorse behind him, I don't know about you, but if I was an adder basking on a bank, I'd probably choose a slightly bigger gorse bush to hide under to protect myself from predators. But what do I know, that's just me. Thanks very much to the organising committee for inviting me to speak today. My name is Becky and I'll be sharing some of our observations at the Cornwall Reptile and Amphibian Group on the characteristics of microhabitats used by adders to bask in the springtime in Cornwall. Microhabitats can really vary across landscapes, and for thermally sensitive species such as reptiles, selecting the right habitat is really important for survival. Vegetation structure and topography influence what microhabitats are available across the landscape and create a patchwork of microrefugia for reptiles to choose from. Simple changes in vegetation structure can really influence things like the amount of light reaching the ground, or the wind speed experienced at different levels, and the temperature that animals experience both on and above the ground. Also, the ebbs and flows of the land, the topography, can really influence the surface temperature that's experienced at ground level. Ground that is angled in parallel to the sun will warm up much faster and maintain heat for longer than areas facing away, for example. Not to mention that heights above and below ground can vary significantly over short vertical distances. So the thermal properties of microhabitats can really differ depending on the composition of the vegetation and the topography across different landscapes. So there's various microclimates they can choose from to meet their thermal needs. Reptiles thermoregulate their body temperature by basking in direct sunlight or by moving in and out of different microhabitats that offer different levels of heat. So this is a really important behaviour for reptiles, as their body temperature needs to fall within an optimal range to carry out various biological processes such as growth and digestion. The adder species here in the UK is no different to this. We experience seasons, and so adders in the UK are known as temperate zone snakes. So they hibernate underground during the winter when it's cold and re-emerge in the spring as it warms up. So during the spring, adders can be quite picky about the microhabitats that they choose to occupy, because they need to find habitats that are both thermally suitable and those that offer protection from predators. So the optimal body temperature for adders is around 30 degrees Celsius, and we'll often see them basking on south-facing banks. So basking for prolonged periods of time in the sun is quite risky for adders, as it leaves them quite exposed. So when choosing the right microhabitat to bask, adders will need to be thinking about two things. One, where am I going to warm up best to carry out my activities? And two, where am I least likely to get eaten? So it's quite a fine line to navigate. So how do they balance this trade-off? So the first is occupying mosaic habitats, whereby adders can shuttle between patches of sun and the undergrowth, which can have various forms of vegetation and topography. Adders can also bask in edge habitats, so for example on the edge of a larger habitat feature, such as a dense, tall scrub strand, where they are protected overhead from predators, but can still benefit from the nice sun traps that occur in these types of habitats. So in 2019, we set out to look at the differences in microhabitats used by adders at two sites in Cornwall, which were very similar size but vastly different habitat types. The site in East Cornwall was an open heathland site with classic gorse, heather, fern, many lichen species, but had seriously variable topography, so flat ground and steep banks. The second survey site in West Cornwall was much flatter than the eastern site and had little bare ground covered in a blanket of tussocky grass, and tall dense scrub strands were abundant. So the taller canopy at this site potentially buffers against some of the wind effects and heat dissipation that is more likely to occur at the open heathland site. So potentially this site offers good basking temperatures for adders through sheltering effects. So there's clear variation between the sites, one with very hilly terrain with open low growing patchwork vegetation, and the other with very flat terrain though densely packed with tall vegetation. So we set out in the spring of 2019 on favourable sunny days and carried out surveys at various points in the day to collect microhabitat variables and measure different things to do with the microhabitat for the basking sites of adders at these two sites. So for microclimate, we measured the ground surface temperature, and looking at microhabitat, we measured the ground slope aspect that looked at the microhabitat canopies used by adders and the surrounding surface vegetation. So surveys at the East Cornwall site started slightly earlier than at the West Cornwall site, and we found males, females and juveniles basking whilst out on surveys. And we made two key observations on the microclimatic features of adder basking sites. Firstly, we found considerable variation in basking temperatures between March and May. And this suggests that the thermal quality of basking site can vary across the season, becoming warmer towards the summer as expected. Secondly, we found no evidence that the temperature of basking sites varied between the different habitat types. And this is quite interesting because despite the fact that the two sites offer very different habitats, adders are able to meet the same thermal requirements despite these differences. So it may not necessarily be the case that one habitat is better as it has warmer temperatures, but the adders are able to find suitable microhabitats to meet their thermal niche regardless of the broader habitat site. So let's take a look at what some of these key differences in microhabitat characteristics may be when we're trying to find where this variation might lie. So in this study, adders basked in areas with southerly aspects as expected and has been documented previously. Though surprisingly, they have fairly similar thermal regimes in both the open habitat and the dense scrubland and woodland habitat, as I mentioned earlier. But we found significant variation in other microhabitat features. The ground slope of basking sites, the microhabitat canopy type and height, and the proximal surface vegetation cover. So at the site in East Cornwall, an open lowland heathland site, adders mainly basked in mosaic habitats on steep slopes, and these had lichen or herbal substrates with low gorse or heather microhabitat canopies. At the site in West Cornwall, which was a mixture of scrub and woodland habitats, adders basked on flat terrain on low-growing bramble in edge habitats with tall blackthorn or hawthorn microhabitat canopies. So our key observations are that the microtopography and the microhabitat of basking sites used by adders can be very different between different field sites. And this brings up a variety of questions. So how generalizable are these findings? Is this just in the southwest, or does this expand further? Could we learn something for more efficient habitat management or more efficient surveying? And are these features actually important drivers of adder behaviour? we weren't able to differentiate the issue of availability versus preference in our study. So whilst adders would only occupy habitats that met their thermal niche, we can't disentangle the availability and preference issue. So for example, dominant dense scrub habitat in the West Cornwall site may have limited the number of suitable microhabitats available to adders for basking. So perhaps differences may be due to variation in habitat availability across sites rather than adders preferring different types of microhabitat. But to disentangle this, we need more sites. So if anyone is interested and would like to contribute to this work, please do drop me an email. I'll be happy to hear from you. We'd also like to try and start looking at other things as well in the microhabitat. So light levels, humidity and the amount of radiation actually reaching the ground would be interesting to see how microhabitat preferences varies amongst those variables. But nonetheless, it highlights how important it is to implement adaptable management regimes at sites to maintain areas of suitable microhabitat through site-specific habitat management regimes. Already at our West Cornwall site, with dominant dense scrub cover, we've been able to identify the finite number of important adder basking microhabitats for more targeted management and create more thermally suitable microhabitats based on these templates. Thank you for listening. Small little thank you to all of these people for their contribution to this work. If anyone's got any questions, I'll be very happy to hear from you. Questions, queries, or comments are all welcome. Please do drop me an email, which is just listed there. I wish you a fantastic afternoon.
So if anyone does have any questions for Becky, so Peter West says that we have one site that has a north-facing bank alongside a road with two rough rows of bramble scrub running east-west, but adders are basking on the south side of these scrub rows despite the north-facing aspect of the site.
I guess you need to look at it in a holistic sense, really, I guess. So one of the biggest things that I'm facing at the moment with people coming to me with questions about adders is disturbance. So that would be my first question, is what level of disturbance and what kind of disturbance are the adders experiencing? So that would be my first inquiry, really, is what's happening around that area. So yeah, I guess just there's lots of things going around in my mind at the moment. I'm really conscious of time as well, so I'm happy to come back to you on that one, and I know Becky would have some input on that as well. But that would be my first thought, was what's happening around that area. We're seeing adders in Cornwall behaving in what would be normally considered quite strange ways, but actually the questions are always answered by disturbance at the moment. So yeah, that would be my first thought.
Thank you, Nicola. And Charlie has asked, is the paper published? I believe it, I'm not too sure. I can ask Becky.
So we're in the process of, I've been working with Becky on this since the beginning. So we are in the process of publishing it. It's not actually out there at the moment, but certainly is. This was worth mentioning, this is a pilot study with the view to, as Becky has said, expanding on this work. It's really important work that we're doing because we're actually informing our habitat management work as well. So we will be looking to include other sites. So please do come forward if you've got any suggestions for other areas, particularly where you're managing that habitat and want some assistance with that. So don't be shy in coming forward.
Thank you, Nicola. So we've got our next speaker now, Pete, who is both so from Dorset and the Hampshire and Isle of Wight amphibian reptile group.
There you go. Hi folks, and wearing my my Dawn shirt today. So let's just get something started over here. So folks, I think, yeah, welcome to the little workshop session. This is not meant to be a presentation. I'm not a grass heap expert by any means. the object of the workshop itself is to encourage discussion, bit of engagement, some dialogue, and to ask questions and see from a participant, from an attendee perspective, who's got what experience, who's got some ideas, thoughts and concepts, and possibly some answers to help us answer some of the open questions and some of the topics that will be raised. So from a, is it going to move on? Yeah, there it goes. So from a workshop scenario perspective, I have in my mind engaging with a land manager who has suitable habitat, fairly large area, and it contains all the widespread species. Their winter planning is underway, and one of the enhancements that they are discussing is the creation of grass piles and grass heaps. And linking back to Sheila's earlier talk about the animals and the surveying going on in the churchyards, virtually every churchyard that one visits nowadays, particularly the older areas, has got a grass pile or a grass heap somewhere within the grounds. Seeing a lot of this and bearing that sort of engagement with the church conservation group in mind, I'm thinking about, what should we or could we be advising them in terms of their grass heaps, their cuttings heaps, that would better benefit the animals that are living within that little area, either those small churchyard type areas, burial ground type areas, or even the larger macro environments, big commons, heathlands, etc. And what could or should we be doing? There's a fair amount of literature about grass heaps out there, but I'm interested in maybe moving away from strictly a literature-based conversation and trying to open a bit of dialogue about what people are actually doing. So we have got a few polls that we're going to run through just from a participant engagement perspective. And then we'll be discussing things that relate to those particular polls. So I think what we're going to do now, Ange, we're going to try poll number 1. For the attendees, have you or your group created grass heaps or nesting heaps specifically for grass snakes? Has that been a particular focus? And what we haven't. Yes, we've created grass heaps, but not specifically for grass snakes. And or option number 3, we've created grass heaps specifically for grass snakes. It kind of ties into what I was thinking. We're looking here, 63% respondents saying they have not created grass heaps. 22% have created grass heaps, but not specifically for grass snakes. And 19% have created grass heaps specifically for grass snakes. Now that may be down to various reasons. We haven't sort of gone into it there on the poll in terms of what the reasons are for why people may not have. But let's just open up that particular question, and I'm going to just jump across to my next slide. And I think it all kind of ties in there. So we were asking the question, why grass heaps? What we're trying to do is establish, so if we're not building, or if we haven't engaged in building grass heaps for grass snakes, what is the reason for that? Are there no grass snakes in your particular area? So it's not worth it. If you're out doing habitat management, is it easier to just burn the cuttings? what is the sort of scenario, the feedback from folks related to why we are, if it's not for grass snakes, why are we building grass heaps? Or alternatively, why are we not building more grass heaps for animals? I think if you read them out, then everybody benefits from them. Thanks, Ange.
I'll do that. So Caroline Mountain says, grass heaps seem quite temporary. On some sites I visit, grass heaps have moved or discontinued use, so are reducing. So that's a fair point, that this is a temporary structure. And they do, I mean, we'll talk about this later, that they do require some maintenance. Andy Ryder says, we have created a few, particularly at 1 or 2 sites. Kevin Clark, we have only created grass snake, I can't say it, snake heaps on prolific grass snake sites. So that's interesting. They've targeted the sites they've put the heaps on in Nottinghamshire, we should say. I should read out where people are from, but I don't know where everyone's from. Rob Ward says, experience from Jersey, work with landowners, land managers to build grass heaps. One limitation we found was that on double SIs, their version of triple SIs, we couldn't bring in vegetation material from other sites due to risk of introducing unwanted plants and creating spikes in nitrogen. And can I just add to that, that the Environment Agency got in touch with me very cross when we launched our leaflet, because we included pictures from Avon, and they thought we were encouraging people to build grass snake heaps next to waterways. So I was asked to make it very clear that grass snake heaps with manure were not to be created next to moving water because of pollution. Caroline N to everyone, hand wave option might be the best option. Yes, that's an option. Agree, Caroline, ideally need topping up every year or so, and that's something else we're going to talk about in the end of the polls. Nicola, I had to be careful where I place grass heaps as livestock get sick if they eat them. So Nicola won't mind me saying she lives on a small holding, so that's very also important that you must be careful where there are livestock, because obviously they'll pile into any sort of heap of grass and they can get very sick from that. Chris Monk, Derbyshire, not in Southwest, but created grass heaps on protected site next to farm after farm muck heap has been spread before eggs had hatched, and it was colonised by snakes. Okay. Kevin from Nottingham again, we had to use natural vegetation near water, which is back to that comment about not bringing vegetation in. And Terry Lee, and I don't know where Terry's from, I have a grass heap in my garden. I think it's a lack of local awareness of their benefit and a view of untidiness. But that's all the comments, Pete.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Thanks, Ange. And so wonderful input from everybody. I really appreciate it. Thank you. So if I pop across to there, so I've opted for minimal writing on slides today and just sort of sticking with the pictures and opening up another piece of conversation here, and please do add your views in the chat again. But my question here is, how often does this topic, creating grass heaps for grass snakes, perhaps specifically, but also for other species, how often does this topic come up and get discussed with land managers or landowners that you as ARGs or volunteers are engaging with? Is it, are grass piles that are being built part of the actual planned seasonal habitat management outcome, or are they more often than not just an incidental happy accident? So from that perspective, are there any views? Yeah, I've got a few pictures there of some of the Don folk in conversation at one of the recent habitat events that we took part in, and we did spend some time building a few log piles and heaps, in fact lots and lots of heaps of trees and cuttings and things all around the edge of this this particular clearing. We moved tons, literally tons and tons of felled trees and shrub. But there are areas and there are sites, in the little pictures on the left, where this particular site, the branches and the little logs and sticks and things that they've cut down over time have been piled up for usage in some way. They've got different, call it different pens as such, made up with old bits of pellet and what have you. Some of them have got manure in them, and the one next to it has got leaves, and the one next to it has got grass. So they're obviously thinking about stuff, whether they're just composting it or they're thinking about using it for heaps. But there's an actual thought process going on there. And I'm just wondering whether, yeah, in terms of engagement that you have with people, whether people are actually thinking and making plans going forward in terms of what they're going to do around grass heaps. Any views on that?
So Kevin Clark, again, Nottingham, grass piles are quite commonly made by land managers by accident mainly, not for specific species, I've found in my area anyway. In Notts, FE have also been putting shaving piles down on a slow worm site, so that would be wood shavings. And Nicola, Cornwall, agree with Kevin, often they're incidental, but that can lead to issues when they're colonised and then moved or damaged. So there's an awareness issue there of accidentally creating habitat.
So do we feel that there would be a distinct advantage in increasing the level of engagement that we as I say, as ARGs, as volunteers, as various groups, do we think there would be real advantage in raising the level of engagement related to the awareness of and the value of grass piles with the land managers? Any thoughts around that?
Arbuckle, not sure where from. In one case with a local woodland which has grass snakes, it was a planned strategy each year as part of the maintenance of the pond, more rushes, etc., than typical grass. In another case, we started implementing a grass heap, including some of the remnants after cutting of a new meadow, which is a new instalment this year. So it can be something that's nicely integrated into other habitat management activities, whether deliberately or otherwise. Ian Perkins, Wiltshire. Our Wiltshire Council are exploring cut and collect to enhance wildflower verges, but this might be an opportunity to push heaps in appropriate areas. Kevin, again from Nottingham. Whenever I speak to anyone during habitat management, I always suggest setting up grass piles for herpetofauna use. And Nicola, yes, grass cuttings are seen as a waste product rather than a valuable resource which can be utilised.
Yeah. Poll number 2. Here we go. How many people have actually seen animals on grass heaps? So I know, yeah, I'm sure we've all seen butterflies and bugs and little burrowing bees and what have you, but I think we've listed a few there. Can people select multiple options?
Yeah, yes, they can. They can have as many as they like. So we've got no, grass snake basking, grass snake entering or exiting, which feeds into your next slide, slow worms, common lizard, adder, small mammal, hedgehog, and I put invertebrates in after we spoke yesterday.
There we go.
Lucky. Okay, so I'll just quickly a few more comments about the previous question. Rob Ward, this is Devon. I had one experience where a vegetation heap used by grass snakes had been created by illegal dumping of garden waste on the site. Led to a bit of an awkward conversation with a preference to retain the vegetation pile. But Chris Monk probably not pushed creating grass heaps enough with land managers of nature reserves run by the Wildlife Trust who just want to use grazing to maintain their grasslands.
Good point.
Valid point. And Rob says, yes, he's seeing grass snake basking, grass snake entering, exiting, slow worms on his domestic compost heap. And Andy Ryder also can't vote as a panelist, but yes, common lizards, slow worms and grass snakes all seen using grass heaps. So
24% have not seen things on grass heaps. So again, this might be for various reasons. You either haven't looked or you've looked and they've actually not been there. So that we can expand that out in due course. 33% have seen grass snakes basking. That's, in my mind, that's great. 29% say they've seen grass snakes entering or exiting. Lovely. Slow worms, 38%. Common lizards, 19%. Adders. We've got one person there who has seen adder on grass heap. Small mammals, 38%. Hedgehogs, 10%. And invertebrates, not surprisingly, 71%. So yeah, some great stuff there again. Thank you very much. Right, so leading on from that particular poll, is this gonna, I just need to find somewhere where I can click on my button. Right, there we go. For what it's worth, that photograph there is one of the rare reptile sightings that I have had on grass piles, and tucked away on the grass underneath all that bramble down at the tip of the arrow was a little slow worm in that particular one. So with reference to seeing animals, and I'm really happy in terms of previous poll, 30+% people having seen animals entering or exiting them. The piece I want to move on to now is when you've seen them move on the grass piles, entering or exiting them, is there any common element related to how they enter and exit? So do they lie on the top of the grass pile and then enter, burrowing their way in from the top? Are we seeing them entering and exiting from the bottom of the grass pile? Where and how are we seeing them using or at least entering and exiting the grass pile? And can we, if we know that, can we use that knowledge towards shaping how we build grass piles? If we know that they're predominantly entering and exiting and using the grass piles from ground level, then maybe there's a particular way that we want to build up and structure, and maybe a few more logs with gaps and holes and things at the bottom. On the other hand, if they're entering from the top, maybe we want to put some more sort of gaps and logs and things on the top of the grass pile that encourage more openings. So anybody got any thoughts with regards to that? How are they actually entering and exiting these grass piles? And can that knowledge, if we focus on it, be used to inform the way we build them and what we put into them?
Rob Ward says, depending on arrangement, placement of the pile, but have seen grass snakes entering from the top, as well as basking at the top. My own compost heap, I'm not sure how slow worms enter and exit, but can be found underneath the piece of carpet I keep on top. So that's the mystery. We've seen them leave, but never arrive.
Okay, so good stuff there. Thank you for that. Right, if I move.
Okay, and Kevin Clark says they were entering on the bottom. However, on manure heaps, I've seen snakes on the top rather than the sides. And Rob says the pile was against a bank, so top of the heap was roughly level with the bank. It might be, depends what's around the heap. Mark Nicholson says I would tend to mix twigs with the grass. Not sure if that's better or not. We're going to come to that actually.
We are, absolutely. It's a great, super point. There we are. Right. So I'll move on to my next little piece over here. Open another little question. So if we look at grass heap over here, does one want to encourage vegetation growth over the heap, as in the photo on the right-hand side, or keep them more in the open, such as the photo on the left? And if I go back to my previous photograph, this one here as well, and as I say, underneath this bramble there, beautiful grass pile, grass heap underneath that, but the wildflowers have all grown around it and the brambles have gone mad over the top of it. So what do we think is the sort of preferred option here? bearing in mind that I think in some areas we might be lucky enough to be able to build multiple grass heaps and try different things. Sometimes a small churchyard, a burial ground, we might not have as much space to play around and try different options. So interested in people, in terms of people's views, what do we think the more beneficial grass heaps might be?
Anna Dayton from Norfolk, I know that. Wildflowers grow over the grass pile. The more brambles and gorse, the better for the snakes. Kevin, again, from Nottingham, actually Northamptonshire as well, fields that have manure heaps with vegetation growing through it on it was preferred by the grass snakes rather than the newer, less vegetated heaps. Kevin Arbuckle, as with most things, I can't speak, most things in ecology, a happy intermediate is likely best. Too overgrown, you interfere with basking. Too little cover, and you interfere with shelter escape. And Rob Ward, key thing is probably, right, where the internal part of heap is hitting temperature and humidity required. At some point, the grass heap probably becomes shaded out. Conversations I've had with Pete Hill, South Wales, in the past, he suggested the larger the pile, the better. He has some piles with tens of grass snakes using them at any one time.
Fabulous, fabulous. So yeah, all of those comments hit on some of the points that we are going to touch on shortly as well. So it just goes to show that this is stuff that people are looking at, people are aware of, and it'd be really interesting ultimately to try and bring more of this together in some sort of output from these kind of conversations. The question here was, when you've created a grass heap, did you use a mix and go to the effort of bringing manure and supplement the sticks and grass cuttings? 58% said no, and 42% of respondents said yes. That's super. So let's keep that one in mind, because we're going to hit that little topic in a moment. Just going to make a little note here, 58 and 42. Lovely. So let me move on to my next little step over here. One of the things that we see is many grass piles, such as these, located right on, or in fact inside, the bordering tree line, often where they're going to get very little sun. This is probably, in many cases, in order to keep the site looking tidy. There's also the issue related to, and I think the point that Rob brought up a moment ago, the fermentation that takes place inside these grass heaps, in terms of raising the temperature inside them, the humidity inside them, etc. Where do folk feel these should ideally be situated? The photographs I've got there, sort of show two on the bottom photograph and the photograph on the right, two that are really tucked away predominantly in the shaded corners, particularly during summer. When the trees are in full leaf, those are they probably don't get touched by the sun. Top left photograph there's one that's kind of been left, that stuff has been mowed in that field and stuff has been left right up against the tree line. That is a fairly open tree line. It's probably going to get a fair amount of sun on a good day. And it's right up against the edge, and my view is that's probably not a bad thing. But how important is it to have them out in the open, getting enough sunlight? I think extra sun on the piles obviously going to provide additional basking spaces as well. So any comments around that?
Clark, covering older heaps with black material, you could artificially raise the temperature. Valid point. Rob Ward, in terms of material, I think sometimes risk of just using vegetation that is on site is it may be too woody to break down sufficiently. Obviously, it depends on what is available. Others have noted some of the issues of bringing in manure on some sites. And I know you've mentioned this to me as well, Pete. It's okay if you have manure to hand, but what you don't. Duncan Sweeting, Suffolk ARG did a 5-year project on grass snake egg-laying sites at Alton Water with a series of different structured piles and data log temperatures and humidity in each. There was a fact sheet based on the findings. John Baker produced it. So
that's really useful. That's great. Thanks, Duncan.
And Caroline Manton again, being in the hedge or tree line is okay if the heat gets sun, and that's true. I mean, you can be under a tree and still get sun, can't you? So,
yeah, so it is something that I think is probably really useful conversation, particularly with the slick sites. How to have that conversation with the church and the burial ground conservation group, though, in such a way that they build these grass piles in these areas where we are now finding animals, but in a way that is sensitive to keeping the area looking tidy, as visitors to the church and the graveyards would expect to find them. So there are certainly challenges, however we want to look at this, but useful stuff.
Yeah, and Chris Monk has said, always put them where the sun can shine on them, so not under trees. And I think, yeah, that's the ideal, isn't it? As you say, we in a more manicured site such as a churchyard, you've got the quite a lot of people wanting it to look tidy in inverted commas. Absolutely.
So I'm going to click on this. So we're going to do poll 3 there. So that touches on the bringing manure to site. So we've got our results on that. So here I've got just a photograph of a fairly nice sort of manure mix bin. There we are. There it comes. So using a mix, 58% said no, 42% said yes. Is there evidence, and related to this, that the cost and the effort of bringing the manure or the mix increases the breeding or the incubation rate to justify it? And I think, Angela, this is something that we spoke about in terms of if you've got manure ready and available that you can bag, load, and bring to site, and you have the means to bring it to site and get it to where the grass pile is, that all of that, I expect for most groups and sites and what have you, would involve cost, effort, transport, and etc. What goes along, whatever goes along with that. So is there the evidence that the mixes actually do result in better populations or better incubation, better breeding rates than those piles created without the mixes? Has anybody got any thoughts related to that?
Ryder, we definitely had landowners who haven't want anything brought onto site, including manure, and have sometimes been concerned about more active composite heaps producing more heat than grass alone, with any other organic matter potentially attracting rats. I haven't thought about that. We did talk about rodents, small mammals. Our experiences would seem to indicate mixed heaps are more productive and warmer. Kevin says, we made some heaps with manure and some without. More snake sightings were around the manure mix, although none of the surveyors might have been around at the right time. Luckily, we had the manure delivered free from local landowner farmer. Jill also raises, is there not also a risk with importing manure material of also importing bio issues rather than just using local flora? So do you know when you obtain the manure, be it cattle, pony or whatever, that it's not being treated with some noxious substance? Chris says, when working as land manager, pay contractor to bring fresh horse manure to form base and rangers topped up later with grass cuttings on the site.
So a nice mix of responses there. Certainly the bio alert, something for us I think we always need to keep in the back of our mind, or increasingly in the forefront of our minds and our actions and activities on site. I think it's something, if we're working with land managers and sites where we can build more grass heaps, maybe something that the ARGs could look into is building grass heaps of different types, like we put down tin refuge, corrugated, coralline and felt mats. Maybe we could build in fairly close proximity to each other different types of grass heaps, and then use those as part of our ongoing surveying to see exactly which ones the animals are most likely to be seen on, such as Kevin's comment there. So great.
Kevin Arbuckle, who's actually in South Wales, major issue we'd have with bringing material from elsewhere is Japanese knotweed, so that's on the bio issue. We have it pretty much everywhere. The smallest bits of the plant that gets into material, one way or another, will spread it further. Wow. That is a potential issue.
That very much so. So, creation to value. So, some thoughts around this. How long would it take the average grass pile to reach a stage where it starts delivering value to grass snakes? So this kind of links into the previous question and topic. Grass piles need to ferment. This generates the heat for incubation, the useful heat. So it goes in some way towards reinforcing the importance of keeping the grass piles, the grass heaps themselves on site in the same place, because we know the snakes will come back year after year to the same grass heap and reuse them. So from starting to create one, what's the sort of thought process? I imagine year one, very limited value. Year two, we might start getting into some value. By which sort of stage do people think, that the one on the photograph there, that's a massive old grass pile. It's not far from me. I've known it to be there for at least 15 years. It just gets added to each season when they cut the local field.
The specific answer for that question, although other people are also talking about chemical biohazards and invasive species, is first season.
Mm-hmm. So I suppose what we're taking from this is, Duncan, it'd be interesting to know first season usage, or first season or being used to actually lay eggs within that first season.
Value fairly quickly for general use. That's what I was thinking with microservices asking. Whether or not suitable for egg incubation will be variable. So that's Rob Ward again. Mm-hmm. And Duncan has added to first season egg laying.
So that to me, that's a fantastic piece of information, because if we can engage with a land manager or a partner out there and say, this is what we can do. You've got grass snakes in the area, and we know that within the very first season, potentially grass snakes in the area would be using it to lay their eggs. Yeah, that's a fantastic tick in the box and a brilliant conversation to be having with our land managers. Poll number 4, and so this comes up regularly, and I think it ties into a lot of questions that we actually see on the Facebook discussion group as well. Movement or maintenance of grass heaps, compost heaps, grass piles. People want to move these things. They want to turn them over. They want to do stuff with them. Should they? Shouldn't they be? If people are having to move things or are having to do maintenance with them, where they might need to repile up that which other animals might have broken the pile down. When's the best time to be doing this? Aware that lots of things hibernate potentially inside them during winter, so maybe not a great time. That July, September period, maybe not a great time, because that's when the eggs and things might be in there. When do we feel is probably the most appropriate period if someone was going to be doing maintenance or moving something, for them to be doing it?
Kevin Arbuckle says, I think a key point is grass heaps have two aspects: specific benefits from fermentation and general benefits is often angled in the sun for basking, and the loose nature of the heap enabled ready escape if disturbed. So time to usefulness will be fast for general benefits, a bit slower for specific ones. Nicola mentions that the fecundity of snakes can be compromised, but as general health of the adults compromised with introduction of spray chemicals. This is again a concern about the source of the materials. Chris Monk says build early, then first or second season best. I've seen several heaps too small, so by second season will be cold and damp. And Rob Kevin says vegetation from the site should be used. Rob, good point. Timing of egg laying, June, July, heat needs to be in place and reaching temps and humidity by then. Yeah. Plus, the grass snakes must have come across the heap to know the features there to use. And Ian Perkins, who's Wiltshire, we build fairly large heaps in the fenland of our small reserve in October. Unfortunately, they've reduced quite a lot in size by June.
In terms of moving or maintenance of heaps, winter, January to March, 14%. Spring, April to June, 57%. Summer, July to September, 29%. And autumn, October to December, 14%. The majority there suggesting spring is the better time to be doing stuff with grass heaps, etc. Lovely, thank you. So wrapping up slides, or getting close to the end of the slides here. Thoughts around having things like log piles near to the grass heaps as separate entities. This is a particular site in the rectangular photograph in the far top right corner there. You can see another log pile in the distance. This is a site that's got a fair number of grass heaps, probably more log piles built such as this one. And this was a recent sighting of mine, site I visit a few times a year. It was just absolutely fantastic. This grass snake was fast asleep on top of that log pile, and just it absolutely lay. I managed to get photographs from the other side of the log pile, all the way around it, and it just lay there. It was lights out. It didn't budge, and when I walked off, it was just still there. It was just one of those fantastic moments out doing a survey and finding something there. But seeing it, I've walked past those log piles literally hundreds of times. And on this particular day, it was late in the evening, the sun was largely down, and it just caught my eye. Fantastic. So having log piles in addition to grass piles, value, yay or nay? Any thoughts?
Kevin Arbuckle, this is South Wales. I can't speak. Good log piles are beneficial. Grass heaps are beneficial. So adding either will usually be good. However, whether there would be any synergistic benefits is a lot more uncertain.
Yep.
Duncan Sweeting, Suffolk. Log piles are important to be close for brumation sites.
Mm-hmm.
And Lana from Norfolk, yes, they have value. Yeah. Oh, Andy Ryder, completely agree. Log piles nearby are very valuable. Jill R, log piles could provide habitat for prey. And Nicola says, great, also good for other species. I love a bit of fallen deadwood.
Yeah. So yeah, I think this also feeds into some useful conversation that we can have with our land managers. That it's not an either or. As far as possible, we want to enhance the environment, and that might mean not just adding grass piles or just adding log piles, but adding a variety of features in a particular area. So just, as I say, opens up more scope for more discussion and more awareness in terms of stuff that we can do as groups to add value to some of the areas. We've got a poll about to come up. I think our last little poll, yeah. So you that have seen grass snakes or have had grass snakes use your heaps. And as I say, I saw an earlier comment related to multiple grass snakes in a single heap, which was really encouraging. But it'd just be interesting to see what sort of experience folks have had. 1 to 2 snakes, 75%, 3 to 5 snakes, none. And one person has a result there of more than 6 snakes using a grass heap. Fantastic. Thanks, Ange. Referencing sort of ARG activities, some photographs here kindly provided by Ange. And these, it's things that we as small groups can get together, can do, can organize. Not massive heavy lifting. It's not particularly time consuming, but I think we all agree that there is value sociably, in terms of engaging with members within the group, mental health, physical health, benefits to the wildlife, not just to grass snakes and reptiles, but a whole range of other species out there. So grass heaps, log piles and things, I think absolutely something we should have on our radar and on our activity list. And then just to wrap up here, related to more information, there is the ARG UK Avon produced brochure. It's got information on it. As I mentioned, there is a fair amount on the internet, and we'll try and come up with some feedback related to this particular workshop. But please do have a look at the ARG UK website, where you will find this and other information. And I'm kind of going to wrap workshop up at that point, unless anybody just wants to add any final comments in the chat.
Final comment from Rob Ward. I found 3 egg laying in a heap at once. As noted earlier, Pete Hill has noted tens of grass snakes using some big heaps. So fantastic. Big is beautiful.
Yeah.
Sorry, small urban garden with established wild areas. Is it worth building a grass heap with herps in mind, or without rural links, will it just be an invertebrate haven?
Being in an invert haven is not a bad thing, because they are going to spread out and they're going to, ultimately they form prey species for reptiles in the broader area. So it's never a wasted effort. Everybody, thank you very much for your participation. Really appreciate your comments and your voting. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pete. That was a great workshop. I'd like to thank Gemma Harding and Becky Turner as well for their talks. And we have